The stars stretched far across the black sky. In the middle of that endless space, there was a planet no one cared about. It had no cities, no green forests, no rivers. Only dry ground and sharp rocks spread as far as the eye could see. On that lonely planet lived a being most believed was gone from the galaxy forever. Her name was Vera. Long ago, Vera had been strong. Her wings had carried her across galaxies, and her scales had shone like polished stone. Whole fleets once followed her through battles. Entire worlds had watched her pass above their skies and felt both fear and wonder. But that was long ago. Now her wings were cracked, her hide dry and weak. Her great body lay stretched along the side of a cliff where she had built her resting place. She no longer hunted the stars. She only closed her eyes and listened to the wind rush through the empty land. Vera's body ached when she tried to move. She could no longer stretch her wings without pain. Her claws were dull, her breath carried no heat. She had lived many lifetimes longer than most beings could imagine, and she had accepted that her end was near. Yet a part of her still remembered the feeling of flight, the rush of wind under her wings, the endless sky opening before her. She dreamed of those days even as her body betrayed her. The galaxy had forgotten her kind. Once there had been many dragons like her, each guarding their own stars. But war, time, and betrayal had taken them away. Now she was the last one she knew. She thought perhaps she would die unseen, her bones sinking into the dry stone of the planet she had chosen as her grave. But fate was not finished with Vera. One day, a silver light cut across the sky above her resting place. It was small, nothing compared to the ships she had once fought, yet it moved with purpose. The sound of its engines echoed across the empty land. Vera opened one golden eye, surprised to see a visitor. No one had come to this world in many years. The ship landed a short distance away, dust and sand rising around it. The hatch opened, and a figure stepped out. It was a human. A small creature compared to her size, yet moving with clear courage. The human wore a simple suit for protection against the thin air. She carried a pack on her back, scanning the land with careful eyes. Vera watched silently. She thought the human would see her and run. That was how most small beings reacted to her presence. But this one did not. The human turned and looked directly at her resting form. There was no scream, no weapon drawn. Only stillness. Then, slowly, the human began to walk toward her. Vera shifted her wings slightly, the sound like stones grinding against one another. The ground shook as she raised her head. The human stopped, but she did not flee. Instead, she placed one hand on her chest, a simple sign of respect among humans. The dragon's voice rumbled deep from her throat. "You are not afraid." The human's reply was calm, though soft. "You are no enemy to me." Vera tilted her head. The human was young, her voice carrying no fear. It had been many years since anyone had spoken to her without trembling. Most beings saw her as a monster. Yet this small human looked at her as if she were more than just scales and teeth. The human stepped closer, careful but steady. She studied the dragon's wings. Cracks ran across the old hide, pale lines showing where time had worn it thin. The human frowned, not with disgust but with concern. "You are hurt," she said quietly. Vera gave a low growl, not of anger but of sorrow. "I am not hurt. I am broken. Age has taken my strength. No oil, no tool, no power in this galaxy can change that." The human shook her head. "Nothing lasts forever, but nothing should be left to fade without care." Her words surprised Vera. So small, so fragile, yet she spoke as if she understood the weight of years. The human introduced herself simply as Myra. She explained that her ship had been looking for minerals on empty worlds. She had not expected to find life, let alone a dragon thought lost to legend. Myra did not leave. She asked if she could stay nearby for a short while, to learn from Vera. At first the dragon laughed, a sound like distant thunder. What could a small human learn from one as fated as me, she asked. Myra answered without hesitation. Stories. Wisdom. Even broken wings have carried the sky. That is worth knowing. For the first time in many years, Vera felt a spark inside her chest. It was not fire, but something deeper. Curiosity. This human was not like the rest. She did not come to hunt, or to run, or to worship. She came to see, to understand. As night fell on the barren world, the stars shone bright above them. Myra built a small light near the base of the cliff, while Vera rested in the shadows. The human spoke of her home, of the crowded cities of Earth, of the endless oceans, and of the dream to reach across the stars. Vera listened, silent at first, but soon her own voice joined the night. She told of battles fought in skies no one remembered, of friends lost to time, of promises broken and victories forgotten. The two beings, one so large and old, the other small and young, sat under the same stars and shared the weight of history. The morning sun rose weakly over the barren planet. Its pale light spread across stone and sand, falling upon the massive form of Vera and the small figure of Myra. The dragon's golden eyes opened slowly, their glow returning as they settled on the human who sat not far away. Myra had not left during the night. She had rested near her small light, wrapped in a thin blanket, breathing softly against the cool air. Vera watched her with a strange curiosity. Few dared to remain in the presence of a dragon, yet this human stayed as if the sight of enormous claws and cracked wings brought her no fear. The dragon stretched her body, the sound of scales shifting echoing like rocks sliding down a cliff. Myra woke and sat up quickly, blinking against the light. "You are awake," Myra said, her voice steady. "And you are still here," Vera replied. Her voice rolled deep, vibrating through the ground. Myra smiled. "Why would I leave? I came to explore, and I have found something far greater than stone or dust." Vera tilted her head. "You think I am something greater?" "You are alive," Myra answered simply. "That is enough." The dragon huffed, smokeless and dry, but the sound was close to a laugh. Long ago, many had called her monster, destroyer, or weapon. Few had called her alive as if it were something to be treasured. Myra stood and approached carefully. The ground shook under each small step, not from her weight but from the nearness of Vera's massive body. When Myra came close enough, she looked at the dragon's wings. The cracks along the old hide were clearer now in the morning light. Each line told of long years, battles fought, storms weathered. "You must have flown far once," Myra said, her eyes tracing the span of the wings. "I crossed more skies than you could name," Vera replied with a deep rumble. "But those days are gone. The wind has no use for broken wings." Myra's gaze did not falter. She reached into her pack and brought out a small container. It held oil meant for her ship's engines, nothing special, only a simple tool for machines. She held it in her hand, then looked up at Vera. "May I try something?" she asked. The dragon lowered her head, golden eyes narrowing. "You would place your hand on me?" "If you allow it," Myra said. "I mean no harm." Vera thought of the past. Many had touched her hide before, but always with weapons, claws, or fire. Never with care. She was silent for a long moment, then shifted her body so one wing stretched slightly toward the human. The sound of the old hide bending was rough and painful, but Vera did not pull back. "Do what you wish," she said, her voice low. Myra stepped closer. She opened the container, dipped her fingers into the oil, and gently pressed them against the dragon's hide. The surface was rough, dry, and uneven. Yet Myra moved her hand with patience, rubbing the oil into the cracks, spreading it slowly across the surface. Her touch was light, her movements careful. Vera tensed at first. The sensation was strange, almost forgotten. No one had touched her like this in centuries. She expected it to feel insulting, a tiny hand against a great wing. But instead, she felt something different. Warmth. Care. You do this for machines? Vera asked. Yes, Myra replied. Engines grow stiff, joints crack with time. Oil helps them move again. I thought perhaps it could ease the pain in your wings. Vera let out a slow sound that was half sigh, half growl. You treat me as a machine. No, Myra said, shaking her head. I treat you as something that deserves care. That is the difference. The dragon was silent. Her golden eyes softened as she watched the small hands move across her vast wing. Each stroke of oil sank into the dry hide, making the surface shine faintly in the light. Myra worked without fear, without rushing, as though each touch was important. Memories stirred within Vera. She remembered young dragons flying together, wings beating in unison, scales shining in the sun. She remembered the pride of strength, the freedom of flight. Those memories had long felt buried, but the human's simple action made them rise again. As the work continued, Myra spoke softly. She asked questions about the past, about the stars Vera had crossed, about the worlds she had seen. At first the dragon answered with short words, testing the human's true interest. But Myra listened closely, her eyes wide with wonder, her voice filled with respect. So Vera spoke more, telling stories of ancient battles, of rivers of fire and storms of ice, of friends who had flown beside her and fallen long ago. Myra wrote in a small book, her hands quick even as the other rubbed oil into the dragon's wing. She recorded every word with care, as though she knew the importance of these forgotten tales. Vera found herself pleased. For the first time in many years, someone would remember. When the container of oil grew empty, Myra closed it and stepped back. Her hands were covered with faint stains, her arms tired, but her face carried a smile. It is a start, she said. Vera stretched her wings slightly. The cracks still remained, but the hide felt less stiff, the pain less sharp. It was only a small change, but to her it felt like a gift. You are brave, Vera said. Braver than many who claim to be warriors. Myra shook her head. It is not bravery. It is respect. The dragon lowered her head close to the ground, her eyes level with Myra's. The human stood firm, not stepping back. Their gazes met, one golden, one brown, one ancient and one young. For a moment, the silence between them carried more weight than any word. Then Vera spoke again, her voice deep and steady. If you wish to stay, you may. Few have ever earned a place beside me, but you have done so with your hands, not your weapons. Myra nodded, her face bright with quiet joy. Then I will stay. As the sun climbed higher, the dragon and the human stood together on the barren land. One was a legend nearly lost, the other a small explorer from a distant world. Yet between them, something had begun to grow: trust, respect, and the first steps of a bond that neither had expected to find. The galaxy had forgotten Vera, but Myra had not. And that simple choice to care, to see the dragon not as a monster but as a living being, had already begun to change everything. The days passed slowly on the barren world. The sun rose weakly, the winds carried dust across the rocks, and silence ruled most of the land. Yet near the old cliff where Vera rested, silence no longer felt empty. Myra's voice often filled the air as she spoke about her travels, about Earth, and about the stars she dreamed of exploring. Vera, in turn, had begun to speak more than she had in centuries. Each evening, Myra would sit close to the dragon's great wing with her small container of oil. She rubbed the liquid carefully into the cracked hide. At first she had worked only on a single patch, but now she moved slowly along the wing, smoothing the oil into every dry line she could reach. The task was endless, for Vera's body was vast, but Myra never showed impatience. She worked with quiet determination, as though every stroke of her hand mattered. Vera felt the difference. Her wings no longer stung when she shifted them. The deep pain of cracks had lessened, replaced by a faint sense of strength. It was not the return of youth, but it was something she had thought impossible, a slow renewal. She often closed her eyes while Myra worked, letting herself remember what it had once felt like to fly. One evening, as Myra rubbed oil into the rough surface, Vera spoke softly. "Tell me, human, why do you care for me so?" Myra paused, her hands resting on the dragon's hide. She looked up at the enormous golden eye that watched her. "Because you are alive," she said. "And because no one should fade alone." The answer struck Vera more deeply than she expected. She had lived long enough to see civilizations rise and fall. She had seen allies betray one another, had seen glory turn to ashes. Never had anyone spoken to her with such simple honesty. She lowered her head closer to Myra, the ground trembling beneath the weight. "You speak as though life itself is enough reason," Vera said. "It is," Myra replied. "I may be small, but even I know that life carries meaning simply by being here." For the first time, Vera felt something stir within her chest. It was not fire, not the breath of her youth, but a warmth born from the human's words. She realized she was beginning to trust Myra, not as a visitor but as something more. That night, Myra worked longer than usual. She climbed carefully onto the lower part of Vera's wing, her feet pressing gently against the wide surface. Vera allowed it, though her muscles tensed at the unusual weight. Myra's hands moved across the hide, spreading oil with slow circles. The human's touch felt fragile, almost too light to matter, yet Vera sensed strength within it. As Myra worked, she began to speak again. "On Earth, I once cared for an old machine. It was broken, forgotten, left to rust. Others said it was useless, but I could not let it die that way. I cleaned it, repaired it, and it came alive again. It was not perfect, but it moved, it worked. And it made me happy." Vera gave a deep rumble, like thunder rolling in a far valley. "You compare me to a broken machine again." Myra shook her head. "Not broken. Precious. You are more than machines, more than stories. You are alive, and that means you can still rise." The words stayed with Vera long after Myra climbed down and put her tools away. That night she dreamed not of her final rest, but of skies filled with wind and light. The next morning, Myra returned with more oil. She had used most of her supply already, but she had found ways to stretch it, mixing it with simple materials from her ship. She worked with the same steady care, spreading the mixture into the cracked surface. As Myra pressed her hands against the wing, she felt the texture soften slightly. She smiled, her heart lifting at the small success. "It is working," she said quietly. Vera moved her wing slowly, testing it. The motion no longer tore at her skin. She lifted it higher than she had in many years. Dust swirled from the ground as the massive limb cut through the air. She let it fall back gently, the earth shaking beneath her. Myra stepped back, her eyes shining with awe. "You moved it? Truly moved it?" The dragon lowered her gaze to meet the human's. "It has been long since I felt such freedom in even a single motion. Perhaps your hands hold more power than you know." Myra laughed softly, her face bright. "It is not power. It is care. And care brings strength." For the first time in centuries, Vera felt laughter rise from her throat. It rolled out like distant thunder across the barren land. Myra joined in, her lighter sound mixing with the deep rumble of the dragon. The empty world no longer seemed so empty. Later that day, Myra asked for more stories. She sat near the dragon's side, her small book ready in her hand. "Tell me of your first flight," she said. Vera closed her eyes and remembered. "I was young then, with wings new and untested. I leapt from the highest mountain of my world. The wind caught me, lifted me higher, and I soared. The stars opened before me, and I thought there would never be an end to the skies. Myra wrote quickly, her face filled with wonder. And was it true? Was there no end? The dragon's eyes opened, glowing with old light. No end. Only endless paths waiting to be taken. I flew until my heart was fire and the stars seemed close enough to touch. Myra closed her book slowly, holding the words in her heart. Then perhaps one day, you will fly again. The words struck Vero like a spark. She had long buried the thought of flight. Yet hearing it from the small human made it seem less impossible. She looked at Myra with careful eyes. You believe this? I do, Myra said firmly. You are not finished. Not yet. Silence fell between them, but it was not heavy. It was filled with promise. Vero lowered her head close to Myra, close enough that the human could feel the warmth of her breath. Gently, she touched her nose to the ground near Myra's feet, a sign of trust. Myra placed her small hand on the dragon's nose. The surface was rough, the size beyond measure, yet the touch carried peace. It was the first true touch between dragon and human, a bridge built not of fear or power, but of care and respect. In that moment, both of them understood that something greater than survival had begun. Vera no longer felt forgotten. Myra no longer felt small. And together, they stood at the edge of a bond that could change the course of stars. The barren world was quiet, but for Vera and Myra, each passing day carried new life. The dragon's cracked wings were no longer as stiff as before. The steady hands of Myra, with her oils and patience, had begun to soften what time had hardened. Every evening, Myra worked slowly, pressing oil into the deep lines, smoothing it until the surface shone faintly in the pale sun. Though Vera's body was vast and the work endless, Myra never seemed discouraged. She often hummed softly as she worked, a sound so small that it should have vanished in the open air. Yet to Vera's ears, the human's hum was clear, carrying warmth and rhythm. The dragon had once flown across skies filled with music of wings, yet this simple sound touched her heart more than any song of the past. On one such evening, as Myra rubbed oil across the outer edges of Vera's wing, the dragon spoke. Do you know what you are doing, small one? Myra looked up. I am helping you heal. You are stirring memories, Vera said. Her voice was low, but it carried weight. What kind of memories? Myra asked softly. Vera's golden eyes grew distant. Memories of skies. Of battles. Of joy and sorrow. Memories of what it meant to be alive without pain. The dragon shifted her body, stretching her wing further than before. The ground shook as dust rose into the air. Myra stepped back, her eyes wide with awe, as the vast wing caught the light of the setting sun. The scales, once dull and gray, now gleamed faintly. You see this? Vera asked. Yes, Myra said with wonder. It shines again. Vera lowered her head, her voice quiet. It shines because of you. Myra smiled but said nothing. She returned to her work, rubbing oil into the edges of the wing until her arms grew tired. When she finally stepped back, she sat against a stone, wiping her hands. Vera's eyes followed her. For a long while, the two sat in silence, broken only by the faint sound of the wind. Then Vera began to speak again. When I was young, I flew with others of my kind. We filled the skies like storms. Our wings blocked out the sun. Our voices thundered across valleys. We thought ourselves eternal. Myra leaned forward, eager. What happened to them? The dragon's gaze fell. Time. War. Betrayal. We believed strength would save us, but strength was never enough. One by one, they fell. Some in battle, some to age, some to despair. I remained, but I remained alone. Her words hung heavy in the air. Myra's hand tightened around her small book as she wrote each word, not wanting any memory to vanish. "You must have carried much pain," Myra said gently. "I carried it until my heart grew heavy with silence," Vera replied. "I thought no one would ever remember them. But now, through you, their stories may live again." Myra's eyes softened. "I will remember. And others will too. You are not forgotten." Vera felt a warmth rise in her chest. For centuries, she had believed herself only a shadow of the past. But now, because of this human, her history found a voice again. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Myra asked for another story. She sat near Vera's great claw, her book open on her knees. "Tell me of your greatest flight," she said. The dragon closed her eyes, and the past unfolded before her mind. It was across a storm of fire. The sky burned red, and the air was filled with ash. Our enemies filled the heavens with ships, their weapons lighting the darkness. I was young, but my wings were strong. I led my kin through the storm. We soared above the fire, higher than the ships could reach. We struck from the skies, and the fleet scattered before us. That day, the galaxy saw the power of dragons." Myra's pen raced, her heart beating fast. "You led them," she whispered. "Yes," Vera said. "But leadership carries a cost. Those who followed me gave their lives. Their names echo in my heart still." Her voice grew quiet at the last words. Myra closed her book and looked up at her. "You honor them by remembering. Their strength lives in you." Vera lowered her head, resting it near the ground. "And now, it lives in you as well." The bond between them grew deeper that night. The old dragon no longer felt only like a relic, and the young human no longer felt only like an explorer. They were partners in memory, bound by respect. The following days brought storms. Dark clouds gathered, and harsh winds tore across the barren land. Myra struggled to stand against the force of the gusts, her small frame pushed back by the storm. Seeing her struggle, Vera lifted one wing and curved it over the human, creating a shelter. Myra pressed herself against the ground beneath the vast canopy, safe from the rushing dust. From beneath the wing, she looked up at the dragon. "Thank you." Vera's eyes glowed faintly in the storm. "It is nothing. Long ago, I sheltered whole fleets with these wings. To shield one human is no burden." But in truth, it meant something to her. She had once been protector of many, but now she found new purpose in guarding this one. The storm lasted hours, but Myra was safe in the shadow of the dragon's wing. When the winds finally calmed, she emerged, her hair tangled with dust, her eyes tired but bright. She looked at Vera with deep gratitude. That night, when the stars returned, Myra placed her hand once again upon the dragon's hide. "You are not just memory," she said. "You are strength even now." Vera lowered her head, her golden eyes shining with light both old and new. For the first time in centuries, she felt not only alive, but renewed. Her wings no longer felt like broken stones. They felt like wings waiting to rise again. Myra's words echoed in her mind as she drifted into sleep. Not just memory. Strength. Perhaps, she thought, the human was right. Perhaps she was not finished. The morning after the storm, the air was clear and sharp. The sky stretched wide and endless, a sea of pale blue above the barren land. Vera lay quietly on the flat ground beside the cliff, her wings folded close. She had not tried to move them since the storm, though Myra noticed how her golden eyes turned often toward the horizon. The dragon's gaze was restless, as though something deep within her longed for more than the stillness of rock and dust. Myra watched her silently. She had been with Vera long enough to sense the change. The oils and care had done more than soften the old hide. They had awakened something inside the dragon. Myra could see it in her eyes, in the way her claws pressed against the ground, in the way her wings twitched slightly when the wind blew strong. "Vera," Myra said softly as she stepped closer. "You want to fly again?" The dragon's head turned, and her golden eyes fixed on the human. For a long moment she said nothing, then her deep voice rolled across the quiet land. "I do. But wanting is not the same as doing." Myra smiled. "Then perhaps we should see if it can be done." Vera gave a low sound, half sigh, half growl. "Do you believe I can rise again? These wings are scarred. My body is heavy with age. The sky is not kind." Myra placed her hand against the dragon's leg, her touch steady. "I believe you are more than age. I believe the sky still remembers you." The words struck something deep within Vera. For centuries she had thought herself abandoned by the skies, a creature grounded by time. Yet hearing Myra speak with such certainty made the thought of flight feel less impossible. Slowly, Vera began to stretch her wings. The sound was like stone cracking, the air trembling as the vast limbs unfolded. Dust rose in clouds as her wings extended, wider and wider, until they reached their full span. Myra stood in awe, her head tilted back as the shadow of the wings covered her. Vera flexed them gently, testing the strength. Pain rippled through her muscles, but beneath the pain there was power. The oil had eased the stiffness. Myra's care had given her back some of the strength she thought gone forever. "Try," Myra urged. Her voice was small but filled with hope. "The sky is waiting." The dragon lowered her body, claws digging into the earth. She spread her wings wide, the wind rushing through the cracks and edges. She pulled in a deep breath, her chest rising with effort. Then, with a mighty push, she struck the ground with her legs and beat her wings downward. The earth shook. Dust exploded into the air. For a moment, Vera lifted from the ground, her massive body rising slowly. But the strength faltered, and she fell back, the ground trembling under her weight. Myra rushed forward. "You did it," she said quickly. "Even for a moment, you rose." Vera growled in frustration. "A moment is not flight. It is the first step," Myra said firmly. "Every rise begins with a moment." Vera closed her eyes, breathing heavily. She thought of her kind, of the endless skies she had once ruled. She thought of her broken years of silence and loneliness. And then she thought of Myra, small and steady, who had seen her not as broken but as alive. She opened her eyes again. "I will try once more." This time she braced herself with deeper focus. She pushed harder, her wings beating with a force that made the ground quake. Dust and rocks lifted into the air. The great body of the dragon rose higher, her claws leaving the earth. She climbed upward, slow but steady, her wings straining against the weight of years. Myra's heart pounded as she watched. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, you can." Vera's body rose fully from the ground. The wind rushed against her scales, cold and sharp, filling her senses. Her wings beat again, stronger now, carrying her higher above the barren land. She let out a roar, not of pain but of triumph, a sound that rolled across the empty valleys like thunder. Myra shielded her eyes from the storm of dust below, tears filling them as she watched the great dragon climb into the sky. She had dreamed of this moment, but to see it was more than a dream, it was a miracle. Vera soared higher, her wings carrying her through the air with strength she thought lost forever. Her body shook with the effort, her muscles burning, but she did not stop. She circled the cliff once, twice, her shadow sweeping across the ground. The feeling was overwhelming. The sky embraced her again, the wind filled her wings, and for the first time in centuries she felt alive as she once had. She had thought the sky no longer wanted her, but now it seemed to welcome her back. She turned her flight downward, descending carefully. Her claws struck the ground, shaking it as she landed. Dust swirled around her massive form, but her wings folded with pride. She lowered her head, her golden eyes glowing brighter than before. Myra ran toward her, her face bright with joy. "You flew," she cried. "You truly flew." Vera's deep voice carried strength and wonder. "The sky remembered me. It did not turn me away." Myra placed both her hands on the dragon's leg, looking up at her with awe. "I told you. You are not finished." The dragon rumbled with a sound close to laughter. "Perhaps not. Perhaps this is only the beginning." For the rest of the day, Vera tried again and again. Some attempts were short, lifting only a little before landing. Others carried her higher, her wings stronger each time. Myra cheered for every effort, her voice echoing across the barren land. Each attempt built confidence, each moment brought more life back into the dragon's heart. By sunset, Vera stood tall, her wings folding neatly at her sides. Her body was tired, but her spirit burned with fire. She gazed at the horizon, where the last light of day painted the sky red. "Myra," she said, her voice steady. "I thought my time was at an end. But you have given me back the sky. For that, I owe you more than words." Myra shook her head. "You owe me nothing. You gave yourself flight. I only helped you see it." The dragon's eyes softened. "Then we share it. The sky belongs to both of us now." Together they stood at the edge of the cliff, watching the stars appear one by one. The dragon's heart, once heavy with silence, now beat with hope. The human spirit, once only curious, now soared with pride. Night spread its quiet cloak over the barren land. The stars glittered like silver dust across the dark sky, and the moon shone with pale light over the cliffs. Myra sat beside a small fire, warming her hands. Vera lay close, her golden eyes half closed, but her great chest still rose with steady breaths after the long day of flight. She was tired, but there was something in her expression that Myra had not seen before. It was not weariness. It was hunger. Not hunger for food, but for something more. Vera had tasted the sky again. Now, she could not return to silence. Myra felt it too. When she had seen the dragon rise into the air, her own heart had risen with her. She had spent many days wandering through empty lands, searching for signs of wonder, and here she had found the greatest wonder of all. Yet she knew wonders never stayed still. "Myra," Vera said at last, her voice low like the rumble of distant thunder. "The sky is not enough if I stay above these dead cliffs. There was once a world beyond, full of life and sound. I feel its call again." Myra looked into the fire, thinking. She knew what the dragon meant. She had felt it too, the emptiness of the barren land, the silence broken only by wind. To remain here would be to waste the gift of flight. "Then let us go," Myra answered. Her voice carried no hesitation. "The world is wide. You should see it again. And I want to see it too." Vera lifted her head, studying the small human with glowing eyes. "You would ride upon my back and face what lies beyond." Myra smiled faintly. "I came here with only my own 2 feet. With you, I could go farther than I ever dreamed." The dragon gave a deep sound that shook the ground, a sound that was almost laughter. "Then at dawn, we shall leave these cliffs. The call of the world must be answered." When the sun rose, painting the sky gold, Myra climbed onto Vera's back for the first time. The scales were rough beneath her hands, but she found her place between the ridges of the dragon's spine. Vera spread her wings wide, their shadows stretching far across the land. "Hold fast," Vera warned, her voice steady. Myra gripped the ridges, her heart beating faster than ever before. The dragon bent low, then pushed off the earth with thunderous force. Her wings struck downward, lifting her body high into the air. The ground fell away, and the cliffs shrank behind them. The wind rushed against Myra's face, strong and cold, but she did not close her eyes. She wanted to see everything. Vera climbed higher, circling once before turning toward the distant horizon. Her wings beat with strength, carrying them far from the land of silence. The wind whistled through the cracks of her old hide, but she no longer feared weakness. Her body had remembered its strength, and the sky welcomed her once more. Below them stretched the empty land, broken by rivers of stone and patches of withered trees. But beyond that, Myra saw something new. Faint lines of green, like veins of life, spread across the land. It was distant, but real. There, Myra called above the roar of wind. Do you see it? Vera tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes narrowing. I see. Life still walks in this world. The dragon angled her wings and glided toward the green. Her great body moved with smooth grace, each wing beat carrying them farther from the barren cliffs. For hours they flew, passing over cracked plains and valleys carved by time. Myra held tight, her arms trembling from the effort, but her spirit soared higher than fear. As the sun climbed higher, the land below changed. The cracked earth softened into rolling hills, where patches of grass grew. Streams of clear water glittered in the sunlight. Birds, small and swift, rose from the trees and darted across the sky, their cries sharp and alive. Myra's eyes widened in wonder. It is beautiful, she whispered. Vera rumbled deep in her chest. It is more than beautiful. It is alive. I had forgotten the sound of wings not my own. They flew lower, gliding just above the treetops. The scent of leaves and earth rose up, filling the air with freshness. Myra laughed, her voice free and light. She felt as though she had left behind all heaviness, all sorrow. But the journey was not without challenge. By midday, dark clouds gathered ahead. The air grew colder, and the wind grew fierce. Vera's wings cut through the storm, but rain struck hard against her hide, making her muscles ache. Myra clung tightly, the cold seeping into her bones. Shall we turn back? Myra called. Vera's voice thundered above the storm. No, a storm is but another test. We will not hide from it. Her wings beat harder, forcing them through the rain. Lightning flashed across the sky, bright and sharp, but the dragon did not waver. Her body, though old, carried her with strength that came from more than muscle. It came from will. At last, the storm broke. The clouds parted, and sunlight spilled once more across the land. They flew out of the darkness into a wide valley below, where rivers ran bright and forests spread far. Myra gasped at the sight. There, Vera said, her eyes glowing. A place where life still thrives. We shall rest there. She descended slowly, landing with a quake of earth beside a wide river. Myra slid carefully from her back, her legs shaking after the long ride. She stumbled, then laughed as her feet touched the soft grass. She knelt by the river, cupping her hands to drink. The water was cool and sweet, unlike anything she had tasted in many days. Birds sang in the branches above, and small animals darted through the undergrowth. The valley was alive with sound. Vera lowered her head to drink as well. The water rippled around her great jaws, and the forest seemed to bow before her presence. When she lifted her head again, droplets of water fell from her scales like jewels. This, she said, her voice rich with wonder, is the world I remember. The world I feared was gone. Myra smiled, wiping her face. Then we came at the right time. The call you felt led us here. The dragon gazed at the valley, her eyes burning bright. This is only the beginning. Beyond these hills, there are lands I once knew. There may be others who remember me, or others who have forgotten. I must see them again. Myra looked at her with steady eyes. And I will go with you. The dragon lowered her head until her golden eyes met Myra's. Then together we shall answer the call. The sky is wide, and the world awaits. They rested by the river until night returned. Myra lay close to the fire, listening to the forest sing. Vera rested nearby, her wings folded, but her eyes stayed open, watching the stars. Both felt it, the pull of the journey still ahead. The cliffs of silence were behind them. Before them stretched a living world, full of unknown paths and forgotten wonders. The call beyond was strong, and they would not turn away. The dawn light spilled across the wide valley, turning rivers into ribbons of gold and making the leaves of the forest sparkle with dew. Vera stretched her wings, their span now strong and shining after days of care and flight. Myra stood beside her, feeling the soft grass under her feet and listening to the faint rustle of the forest around them. The dragon lifted her head, her golden eyes bright with determination. The world is alive again. I have remembered its songs. And yet, there is more beyond these hills. I feel it in the air. The stars call us still. Myra nodded. Then we go. Together. With a gentle flap, Vera rose from the ground. Myra climbed onto her back, gripping the ridges with careful hands. This time, their flight was steady, smooth, and free. Vera's wings cut through the air like blades of wind. The sun warmed them both, and the valleys and rivers stretched below like a living map. As they soared, Myra asked, "Have you flown across all the lands of the galaxy?" Vera gave a low rumble. "I have crossed many worlds, but not all. There are still skies untouched, still creatures unknown. I have seen wonders, but some things cannot be found without searching." Myra smiled. "Then we shall search together. I want to see the worlds you speak of." The dragon's roar echoed across the hills, strong and full of life. "Then we shall. You have courage, human. Few have dared to rise with me, and even fewer have stayed by my side." Myra laughed softly, leaning forward. "I have learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it." Vera tilted her head, impressed. "You speak wisely for one so small." They flew over forests, rivers, and mountains. Myra marveled at every sight: the bright colors of flowers, the way rivers twisted like silver threads, and the distant animals running below. Vera guided them carefully, pointing out valleys she remembered, cliffs where her kin once rested, and skies she had once ruled. Days passed. They traveled far, beyond lands Myra had ever imagined. Sometimes they rested on high cliffs, sometimes in hidden valleys. Each time, Myra cared for Vera's wings, rubbing oil into the cracks that still remained. Each day, the dragon grew stronger, but her mind also grew lighter. The weight of centuries lifted with each flight. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Vera descended to a wide plain surrounded by mountains. Myra slid from her back, her legs stiff but her heart light. The dragon landed beside her, folding her wings carefully. The ground shook with her weight, and the tall grass bent under the wind from her wings. "Rest here," Vera said, her voice soft. "This place feels alive. There is history in its stones, and stories in its rivers." Myra knelt by a stream, cupping the cool water. "It is beautiful," she said, looking up at the dragon. "You have given me so much." "And you have given me more than I thought possible," Vera replied. "Your care, your courage, your belief, these have awakened life in me that I thought lost forever." Myra smiled. "Then our journey is shared. Your flight is my story, and my story is yours." For the first time, Vera felt fully at peace. She realized that her life had a new purpose. She was not just a relic of the past. She was a protector, a teacher, a symbol of strength. And through Myra, she would carry her legacy forward. The next morning, they rose with the sun. Vera spread her wings and lifted into the sky. Myra held on tight, feeling the rush of wind, the lift of the dragon's power, and the joy of moving freely once more. They soared above forests and rivers, the valleys below filled with life. Birds flew beside them for a short while, curious of the dragon who moved like a living storm across the skies. As they flew, Vera spoke. "I once believed that my time had ended. I thought the skies no longer needed me, and that the world had forgotten what dragons were. But now I see that life remembers, and life awaits. We must continue to rise, for ourselves and for those who will come after. Myra nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Then we will. Together, we can go anywhere. Over the following days, they explored lands untouched by humans or dragons for centuries. Valleys hidden by mountains, rivers long thought dry, forests untouched by fire or storm. Everywhere they went, Vera's presence stirred the air, her flight like a song of life returning to the land. Myra recorded everything, writing in her book, drawing maps, and capturing the stories of the world they discovered. One day, they came upon a small village nestled between two mountains. Its people had heard stories of dragons long ago, but they had believed them to be myths. Vera landed on a high cliff above the village, her golden eyes scanning the crowd below. Myra stepped forward, raising her hands in peace. The villagers watched, amazed but unafraid. Vera lowered her head in respect, and her voice rolled across the valley. I am Vera, last of the dragons. I have returned not to harm, but to remind the world of its own strength and courage. The village elders stepped forward, welcoming her. Myra smiled, seeing the bonds forming between dragon and people. Stories of old were remembered, and new stories began. Vera realized then that her legacy would live not only in the skies but also in hearts of those who believed. Through care, courage, and trust, she had found a new purpose. As the sun set behind the mountains, Vera rose into the sky once more. Myra clung to her back, laughing as the wind swept around them. Together, they soared over lands new and old, across rivers and forests, mountains and plains. Vera's wings, once cracked with age, now carried her fully. Her strength was renewed, not by magic or power, but by care, trust, and friendship. She was no longer forgotten, and she was no longer alone. And above the living world, among the endless sky, the dragon and the human became a symbol. A symbol of hope, of courage, and of life itself. Wherever they went, the land remembered the flight of Vera, and the world learned that even the oldest, most forgotten hearts could rise again. In that way, the legacy of flight continued. Not as a memory of the past, but as a living, breathing story carried across skies and lands. A story shared by a dragon and a human, bound by respect, courage, and the joy of rising together.